This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Good evening. We call to order the meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Easthampton. Today is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. You need to change that.
Will do.
I almost said 2024. Is there anyone who is in the audience this evening who would like to speak to anything that is not on the agenda for this evening? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to ZBA minutes.
Minutes.
Okay. All right. Administrative item, the election of chair and vice chair for the 2025 year. Somebody has,
I'm gonna nominate somebody for chair,
and somebody for vice chair.
2 seconds, and then you all vote on it. So you can start with chair. Make a nomination for chair.
I make a nomination for John Atwater for chair.
Second.
If you accept it.
Okay, well, the motion's been made, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I guess that's carried on. Okay, and for vice chair?
I think you had some news. You won't actually be here for next month's meeting, so vice chair is going to actually have to
I
step
might
up
not
and
be
do
here
it.
next month, so whoever is vice chair gets to run the show if they so desire.
Let's not all jump at once here, folks. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and Tim, who is not here, said that he will agree with any chair and vice chair as long as he is not on the list.
Yeah. Let an easy out.
So, well, you want to do it again, Tony?
Yeah. Might as well.
All right, I'll make a motion for Tony.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Moving on, we are opening the public hearing, which was continued from November 20th, 2024 and December 18th, 2024 for Heavy Culture Cooperative Incorporated, seeking a special permit to operate a music bar, which requires a special permit as listed in Table 5-1, Retail and Services-13. The property is located in Neighborhood Business Zoning District at number 1 Northampton Street, map 51, lot 29. So at the conclusion of our last meeting, there was great concern about the noise, any sort of protection against noise and noise emanating throughout the property. And was wondering if you had come up with any sort of conclusions, thoughts, presentations, or anything like that on that.
Nothing additional other than what we supplied in the initial narrative.
Okay.
Pretty confident in the math behind those estimates. So I don't think we have much new to propose at this time.
Okay. And I know that the members of the board were asked to research possible other zoning or regulations throughout the state. And I know that the planning department did some digging.
Yes. So at the last meeting where the board asked if we could look into possible conditions to deal with noise mitigation, myself, the building commissioner, David Gardner, and the planning director, Allison Manuel, we met and looked to see kind of what was there, what we could base this on. And it looks like there is in fact state regulations that deal with noise. And specifically, they have regulation from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, 310 CMR 7, air pollution control, specifically 710, which deals with noise. But the more relevant one is they expanded on the policy on that, which is the Division of Air Quality Control Policy. So, says a source of sound will be considered to be violating the department's noise regulation if the source increases broadband sound level by more than 10 decibels above ambient, or produces a pure tone condition when any octave band center frequency sound pressure level exceeds two adjacent center frequency sound pressure levels by 3 decibels or more. So there is state regulation on there that I understand means something to do with sound. So what we thought would be a good condition here is the board is authorized to bring in third-party review of somebody who is more of an expert than any of us in the planning board or the planning department when it comes to sound. So in kind of crafting the condition, what we're recommending, should the board want to proceed and approve this, would be a condition that states, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall demonstrate compliance with the standards of Mass DEP's Division of Air Quality Control Policy 90-001. Said policy is included in this decision as Appendix A. The necessary testing to confirm compliance shall be conducted by a third-party consultant selected by the board pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, and Section 53G and Section 13 of the Zoning Board of Appeals rules, and the fee for said consultant shall be paid by the applicant. And the thinking around this is, we've heard the claim that the applicants can comply and they can meet a standard that would be acceptable to the neighbors in the neighborhood. And we decided to go with state law on that. And then this would allow them to, they could get their special permit, they could move forward, they could do all the soundproofing that they say will meet this standard. But then before they can get that certificate of occupancy, they will need to do an actual demonstration of what the expected conditions would be inside. However you folks want to do that with, you know, getting the band together and playing at levels that would be expected during a show, that's when we would have to have a third-party consultant conduct the test. And I believe that the DAQC policy explains that that's conducted at both the property line and the nearest inhabited residence. So in both cases, you would have to meet those two standards about broadband sound level and pure tone. And this kind of puts the applicant in the situation of saying, well, they say they can do it. Once they actually go forward, they've invested the money to do the soundproofing. They then need to prove that they can in fact do it. So we would let them build this all out. But if they get to that point where
They're going to do it at risk.
they've done it all, if they can't meet that standard, then they won't get the certificate of occupancy. So it does still put that risk on them. If they want to move forward with that, they can, but they'll have to meet that standard.
And the use of the state ordinance or 310 CMR is in lieu of the city of Easthampton having a noise ordinance in place. We default to state, record.
Correct. So yeah, it does appear that the state has something. I've discovered this as part of this special permit application. So going forward, city of Easthampton might not have a noise ordinance, but the state does. And
it's my understanding that, the only way the city can supersede a state mandate, whatever ordinance, would be as if it was more stringent.
correct.
So, in lieu of the city of Easthampton having an ordinance in place, then, by default, this is the requirement.
That would be my understanding.
And if it was to somehow end up going to the state, they would hold it to that standard.
Again,
Yes.
yeah, that would be my understanding. This all comes from, I believe it's Mass General, it's Chapter 111, Public Health. And essentially it says that the Mass DEP can make these types of regulations. So the Mass DEP could make changes to these regulations without necessarily having to make changes to Mass General Law. But this was adopted in 1990 and still seems to be the most up-to-date law regarding or regulation regarding sound. That's the standard that we'd be holding them to in order to receive certificate of occupancy.
Then I take it all of the other examples that we've been seeing, at least the ones that are within Massachusetts, would be more stringent than the state has. And we're looking at some of the other noise ordinances that have been sent in.
Could be. When we kind of went with this standard here, it's, I can't say to the one-to-one comparison of there, and it may even be just things that are just different, and they could be less stringent, but relating to other things, it doesn't mean that they're not subject to Mass General law.
Yeah.
Oh, seems like a no-brainer to me.
It puts the onus on the applicant. And, it clearly stipulates what the requirement is. And, if it seems to be, acceptable within the state, then, without the city of Easthampton having an ordinance in place, it's, and, in reading over the state regulation, it looks pretty, to my untrained ear,
Yeah.
pretty,
Yeah. We couldn't do better.
No.
No. I think most importantly, it gives both the applicant and the homeowners a viable solution to this. It gives the applicants a way to make their dream come true, but it also gives the homeowners some legal legwork, some legal place to stand on if need be.
okay. All right, so, with that, we will, entertain questions. I will ask that we don't repeat things that have been said in the last two meetings again and again.
But, but we are here to listen to the public. So, anyone? Yes?
Chair, I feel you've done a great job if that's the standard to be met. That's an initial request, an initial standard. Obviously, anyone who has an interest should be notified of that test being done. But my question to this board is, once that test is done, and I've spoke with the police department, they have no way of enforcing any noise ordinances. So what's our capture on the other side if they do pass the test, which my knowledge of this, it's a very high standard, so I'm very happy with it. But if they do pass this and later on there's a problem, where's our recourse? That's my, and to be fair on both sides, where's my recourse or our recourse later on? If I call, obviously I'm not going to call any of you folks. I can't call anyone else. It would be to the police department, correct?
I would imagine, I don't know.
Okay.
Whereas this is Department of Environmental Protection, Mass DEP, does the contact then go to them?
Well,
Or local enforcement is gonna have to be done locally, which would cause potentially, would it be the Board of Health?
Yeah.
Who would become the enforcement officer, quote unquote?
Yeah, so I can actually pull that up here.
before I sit down, I forgot it. Joe Pasternak, 7 Pleasant Street, Easthampton. But to my knowledge, I did ask the police and they said they would be there on all the complaints. They would be there, whatever. They said that noise complaints are not, and they have no equipment in town, zero equipment. So I thank you for your answer. So.
Right. Maybe. I don't know how rigorous the standard is.
It's a high standard.
It is,
Cell phone app might not quite cut it.
but I mean, at least for initial.
And this is something that, again, we would, I can talk about the process of how that looks of actually sourcing out an expert for this. What we want to do,
Yeah.
I assume some type of sound engineer. It doesn't look like the equipment that I've seen. Looking at this is something terribly onerous. I believe the same type of equipment is stuff that the applicant has. Not that the applicant will be conducting their own test, but
No, but
well, they will.
Client before you get the testing.
yeah. But I
Handheld decibel
believe,
meter.
is I believe in here, enforcement. So any police department, fire department, or board of health official acting within his or her own jurisdictional area is hereby authorized by the department to enforce as provided Mass General Law, any regulation in which specific reference, to 310 CMR 752 is cited. So the city does have the authority to enforce this, whether or not they've been choosing to act on this or have the equipment to do so.
And I know I've spoken with the police department concerning this in previous issues. Their answer is there's no local ordinance for them to enforce. But if there's state law to enforce, they have to.
Right.
So, yeah, they can say they won't, or they don't have anything to back it up.
I mean, typically what they would do is somebody called a complaint about the noise. They would go and listen and say, yeah, this is loud, and then go to whoever it is and say, we have a complaint, can you please turn it down?
Right. And it's as with any complaint that the police get called to, they escalate it as required. Not my jurisdiction.
And I mean, yes, as planning, I can't sit here and say how the police will do enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, what's the penalty? Does DAQC include any specification of penalties?
I believe they do, and I believe it's quite hefty.
Ooh, state penalties?
Yes, I want to say it was like
Tasty.
$2,500 for
Well, that's a good incentive to not
violation.
violate that law.
No, that wasn't, this was when I was looking at Mass General Law to find all the instances of it. There are penalties in there. And again, I think it would definitely behoove the city to adopt a noise ordinance, even if it is simply states copy and pasting the state ordinance into its own ordinance. We do that with most things in our zoning ordinance. It's not more stricter than the state, but we've made it very, very clear in an easy to find place. That way nobody is sitting here being like, well, there's no ordinance. Yeah, well, it is there in the state, so we can always just simplify it. But I think as it stands right now, if the board agrees, I think that's this relatively good standard. Again, this type of operation, we have bars that have loud music that are currently subject to this ordinance already.
Though less, I mean, I genuinely think that if we put this into place, someone in town might be getting a penalty. Because I actually do think there are places currently in town that do not meet the standard and there's no enforcement. So no one's checking.
They're operating under the review that there's no city ordinance,
Right.
so how can you enforce it? But in this, we've determined that there's a state ordinance, which basically that's the law of the land.
Yeah.
The only thing I don't,
Sorry, if you could state your name.
sure, I'm Ben Lesko, 21 Lyman Ave. The only thing I didn't notice in the state ordinance was a time frame. In looking around a little bit at other local noise ordinances, a lot of towns had this many decibels are acceptable during the day and like this many less between 11 PM and 7 AM. And I'd like to see something like that in there. And maybe it's in there somewhere.
Well, and I think that that's where above ambient noise, because we know that during the day it's
Yeah.
louder because of the volume of traffic and things like that, even though it's just, ambient noise. It's what we consider, the roar of the highway. I can hear trucks coming down downtown.
Would it be a point during the day? I mean, does the applicant plan on having concerts during the day?
And that's where, relative to ambient noise, this is what is acceptable to at the property line.
I was gonna say, I actually should maybe amend this condition a little bit to say that the test would be conducted between the hours of 9 PM and 12 AM on a Friday or a Saturday. Because I think if we're gonna have
Like Friday
this,
or Saturday.
I think those are probably going to be, reasonable times. We can expect this to be in use, most frequently.
But
We
if
don't
it
really need
happens to be on
don't really need
Tuesday,
it,
and
then.
on Tuesday it's so much quieter in the ambient environment that now on Tuesday the rule is being broken, but we don't test it on Tuesday. Shouldn't we be testing for the absolute worst possible condition, so the quietest possible ambient noise, like late on a weekday? I'm just thinking of eventually when maybe there is a concert on a Monday night or a Tuesday night, and just being sure that we can say that we have done everything we could in putting together a condition that meets everyone's needs.
I'm Ben Brown from the Agriculture Cooperative, at 176 Main Street. I was just pointing out in the, policy 90-001, the ambient, level is defined, as the background A-rated sound level that has exceeded 90% of the time measured during equipment operating hours. So the state regulation does take
You're right.
operating hours into effect.
You're correct. My idea does not work. You're right.
I can't see why we need anything above what the state has put in there.
I agree. And I think, about the time thing, in theory, and I looked at what you sent, and in theory, the ones that are in Massachusetts, they don't have the same wording about ambient noise, but in theory, the limits that are in place should be as or more stringent than the state ordinance.
That is my understanding, that local ordinance by right cannot be less stringent than the state ordinance.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess, yes, it's possible that.
Doesn't mean it doesn't
More
happen, but yeah,
more
you're no different than the situation we have with, the applicant on South Main Street, where they met the state regulation for wetland. But we have a more stringent wetland requirement. We, in lack of local ordinance, which then dictates a more stringent compliance, we are then must be compliant to the state, which is what we are saying. There is no ordinance, so they must be compliant to the state. Thoughts? Any further discussion among the board?
One question I had, sort of a big question. Back in November, you were notified of the mayor's conflict of interest and that she was active shareholder in the cooperative that's seeking the permit application.
Yes.
As a mayorally appointed board, is that not a conflict of interest for us to vote on this application?
She has, in my understanding, we are to operate as a board, not necessarily under her purview, because I was appointed 3 mayors ago. Okay. So, yeah, it is, we are representing the city of Easthampton, not the mayor.
And the mayor's not making any decisions in this either.
She's not making any decisions, and she has been, upfront and look, I am a member, and she has also purposely not attended meetings.
Yep.
Do not sway the board in any way.
Sure.
Okay, and I think that we've done our fair due diligence. But, I appreciate the question.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Further expand on that a little bit, just because where everyone's going to be a resident in town, there may come a time where you need a special permit that goes before this very board.
Yeah, well, I abstain in that case.
You'd have to recuse yourself, and generally, when it comes to perceived conflicts of interests, you'd have to simply disclose that it's there. The mayor's done so.
Yep. Right at the beginning.
Yeah. And I actually had that situation probably 8 years ago, where a cell tower was being constructed adjacent to my property. And I went to the mayor, discussed it, and they were like, there's no conflict of interest because you're going to hear it as if it is. And I also made that statement at the beginning of the meeting. So, full disclosure. So. All right. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to say anything? Questions, concerns? Okay. So at this time, we will close the public hearing. We motion to close the public hearing.
Make a
Second.
motion.
Second. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, moved. Discussion among the board that we've already had, but is there anything else that is of concern? The condition that is there is they must meet the state regulation as put forth in 310 CMR 7.10 for noise. And prior to the issuance of a CO, would be required to undergo testing.
Third-party consultant, which the board will select.
The board will select and the applicant will be full fund. Yes, sir.
I have one other condition. I was hoping that Dan Constantine would be here tonight, but I know they have that condition request of the alarm system throughout the building in addition to fire code. You folks will grant me the, if you guys want to include that condition, we'll grant me the authority to
There are other conditions because
We've
we've,
that one.
in the course of things, we've discussed other conditions. So the fire alarm that will turn off the music and sound the alarm. Isn't that what,
That was my understanding.
that was our understanding as well?
Yep.
That, should a fire alarm go off, music stops,
Yes,
fire alarm sounds.
yes,
Correct.
we've already got a power supply unit that's set up just for that.
Okay. And then the other one was the restricting access to Lyman Ave from the parking lot. That access to and fro the parking lot will be only onto the rotary.
Correct.
And they would close that off. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
And then the last thing, because I want to just get it out here, this was from Allison, just kind of gave me a brief outline. This is something the Concom does regularly. It's not something I have done yet with my time with the city of Easthampton, but just kind of a general outline of what that process would look like for hiring an outside consultant. One, applicant should weigh in on when they want the CBA to initiate this process. So it can be immediately, or the applicant's gotten a little bit further down the road. The applicant should understand that they must submit payment to the city for the consultant before the consultant can be hired to complete the work. The ZBA should move to give the planning department the authority to request quotes from qualified consultants on their behalf. Planning department will prepare a scope of services based on the special permit condition and see quotes from qualified consultants. The ZBA will review quotes received and select a consultant based on qualifications and price. The ZBA will send a written notice to the applicant of the selection of an outside consultant, which notice shall state the identity of the consultant, the amount of the fee to be charged to the applicant, and a request for payment of said fee in its entirety. Applicant will submit payment and the city will deposit it into an escrow account. The city will contract with the consultant and pay their invoices from the escrow account. Funds remaining at the end of the consultation services will be returned to the applicant with any interest accrued during that time.
Okay. Pretty thorough. The applicant has stated they've done work with sound people and sound engineering and things like that. Do we have to worry about any conflict of interest between a consultant and the organization?
It could be, and this is something that we will ask the board to consider.
Like to ask the planning board to consider it as they go about the selection
the
process.
This board.
This board.
Yes, ultimately, we'll be the ones to do the legwork of getting quotes and getting it for you, but it will be you folks to decide who that consultant is.
When we look at the quotes, it's at that point that we would.
Yeah, to ask for any disclosures that you work with, any questions you folks have in making that selection, you'll be able to ask at that point.
I just, I want to make sure that we are, making sure all our I's are dotted, T's are crossed. Okay. Well, with that said,
Through the chair, I asked that at the end of the testing that, it's a public notice that it's on file with the board, so we can inspect it on both sides. Is that fair?
Why?
It should be it's a public document. I mean, everything you do.
Public. It's gonna be a public
Disclosure, so I
document.
just, just so that it's out there.
As
Yeah.
with all public hearings, public documents are
Right. No, I just want to make sure because they're paying for it. It's an independent third-party contractor.
but it's a condition of,
Right. So if this is not met, that means that fails. That means the special permit will be rescinded. Is that correct? Because you make it a term of condition of occupancy. If they,
it's not that the special permit will be rescinded. It will be that they will not be issued a certificate of occupancy until they can comply.
so then what would the process be after non-compliance?
They comply somehow.
They'd have to comply somehow. They could pay for another testing. And then the special permit would expire after 2 years, correct?
Correct. And there might be some where there will have been substantial work that would have exercised that special permit, but they would never be able to receive that certificate of occupancy if they're never able to meet that test. So they could keep putting on more soundproofing and keep trying. And if they are never able to meet that standard, the building commissioner will never issue them a certificate of occupancy.
So they can't use it.
So it could be, after so many times of re-soundproofing before you cut your losses because you can't get that certificate of occupancy.
So the applicant will have to do this all at risk.
Right.
Which puts the onus on them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's very fair that my last question is how do we determine and who will determine what level of testing is done for the music they're producing inside for this test versus what might actually be there at some later date? What is the standard decibel that they're going to achieve or hit, as a maximum, testing, variable or whatever?
That is something we are going to have to write into the RFP for
Perfect, thank you.
the soundage.
Yeah. Yeah, because obviously it's quieter when they test and then louder at another time. So what was the maximum that a group like this has ever produced? If it's tested at that and it's good and it's great, then I'm all for it and I'm very happy as a butter. Thank you.
On that note, I feel like it'll be very invaluable for the applicants to know, okay, this is the indoor sound threshold after which we are breaking state law outside. So when we go to do the testing, I think, if they put on no soundproofing, they can pass the test by just bringing their phone speaker. It just, whatever level they measure on the phone speaker, that's the level that once they are occupied, they shouldn't be going above that. So it's just a balance between how much noise they want to have inside and how much soundproofing they're willing to fund. And hopefully on the first go around, it gets plenty loud inside and the place stays plenty quiet outside. And if we're dancing around edges, then, I have pretty good faith that the applicant would put in a little bit of extra soundproofing just to be sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think having that test and just having the indoor threshold so that the applicant in the future knows where their limit is a lot better than just sort of like crossing our fingers and hoping that everyone has a good day.
As you said, I might just be reiterating it here a little bit, but the idea is as we work with a consultant, the consultant will be telling the board exactly how that test is going to look, what they're going to do, how they're going to do their measurements, and that would be one of the factors you folks would use deciding. Because I, again, imagine they're going to want to know exactly what you said. What is it inside? Because, are we all playing soft when the test is here? I think we're going to want the expert who knows how to measure inside and outside. It's going to be something that you folks will be looking at as you evaluate third-party consultants.
Great. And I would imagine that the applicant is going to want to know how loud they can play it so they can play it as loud as they want.
Or like 2 decibels under.
Right.
We don't want to play with that for.
Yeah.
That's the line, get the color inside the line.
Overall, I think that this solution, as long as everyone has good intentions, which I really believe they do, I think this will work out well.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Does someone have to make a motion and say all of it all at once?
Somebody has to make a motion at least to cover it. If you'd like me to, I can do that.
Okay, I'll take you up. on that.
Okay. All right, I make a motion to approve the application of Heavy Culture Cooperative Incorporated, which is seeking a special permit to operate a music bar that requires a special permit as listed in table 5-1 retail and service -13. The property located in the neighborhood business zoning district at number 1 at Northampton Street in the city of Easthampton. The approval of said application will include the conditions of the prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall demonstrate compliance with the standard of the Mass DEP Division of Air Quality Control Policy 90-01. And the rest of it. The silencing of all music will happen upon the activation of a fire alarm to allow clear and enunciation of the fire alarm. And that the parking and driveway access on Lyman Street will be restricted. Excuse me?
Lyman Ave.
Lyman Ave, I'm sorry.
Lyman Street.
Thank you, thank you.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Yay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your active participation in this. I think that it hopefully is the beginning of a good relationship, and we hope it stays that way.
Yep.
For the city, for the occupants of the building, and for the occupants of the adjacent structures. Okay. So with that said, our next meeting. I guess, do we have to close we closed the hearing, we did everything like that, so we're good there.
Yeah, we are good.
Okay. Oh, the decision will take approximately 3 to 5 days, maybe a week to be written, at which point it will go to the town hall and the city clerk who will stamp it. There is then a 20-day appeal period, at which point you will be notified. And then the owner, I think would have to register, place that with the registry of deeds.
Probably the best person to do it.
The owner has to go to the Hampshire County Registry of Deeds and issue that or get that into the record, public record. For the,
Okay.
with the deed
Okay.
of the property. All right.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And when can we start planning the
So
sound?
that we will have to, the planning board is going to have, planning department needs to put out a request for proposal to get the testing done. We have to work with the planning department to write what the criteria of the test is going to be. And I am sure that if, there are people, there are companies within the state of Massachusetts that know what the state regulation is. And then we will work with them and determine the best time to have it done. We will notify, can we also put in there a notification of abutters as to when the test is going to take place?
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
So the abutters are aware when the testing will take place.
I think that, to the chair once again, I think with what you folks said, testing has to be done within the closest residence. Isn't that what was said?
About
The standard?
inside
They're
I said within the.
within the property.
the property line, yeah.
No,
It says at the nearest inhabited residence. I don't think we have to
Not
open it,
necessarily inside.
At the residence.
but we should get their permission to go on their land,
Sure, sure.
probably.
So, but notification of abutters will happen. Okay, so once we have that in place, and that may take a month or two, just to try to get that all done. And then we will notify you, and you can issue your escrow amount, and we can hopefully go ahead and move forward.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Just a couple things about those timelines as well. Don't hold me to 5 days on that one. We've got a very busy week, the rest of this weekend into next week. So, we will definitely meet the statutory timelines for decision. That one I can promise you.
What is the statutory timeline?
90 days. We won't get anywhere close to that, but I promise you we will not exceed that. And then in terms of testing, that will be a conversation between the planning department and yourselves. And kind of more when you're getting ready for it, because then we'll have to do the scope of work, what it is we're looking for, get a sense of what you folks will be ready for to be tested, the zoning board of appeals, and then we'll go from there. But that's something that we'll be able to coordinate with kind of at your pace.
Okay.
But won't happen until after the appeal period.
For us to begin doing our testing before you bring in the acoustician to verify that we're going to be in compliance. How would you recommend we go about that in terms of timing, communicating with the neighbors, things like that? We are going to be seeing if we are breaking an ordinance that would cost us $2,500. We might have to break the ordinance in order to find out how we could not break the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can't occupy the property unless, they have an OC. So I don't know how you get the testing done, which I'm not trying to make that a problem here.
No. So no different in the, other tests that are completed, inspections, things along those lines that are done where, failure tests on structures or things like that. There has to be some.
Yeah, it has to be done before you
It
can
has,
test it.
it has to be done before you can test it. You have to test it to make sure it's compliant. And the best way you can do that, would probably be to communicate with the planning board or planning department and say, we are to a point where we think we are ready to start testing.
Mhm.
And we are going to be doing testing between this time and this time on a certain day.
Probably do it during the day.
Preferably, just for,
Yeah, we can talk to figure that out.
right.
And then you can, I don't know, you could do some of your own measurements of day versus nighttime ambient.
Most smart devices have these devices in them, or you can go and buy a, handheld.
In general, though, if there is clarification on occupancy before certificate of occupancy, as it were, so when we are able to occupy, with how many people, et cetera, like we want to make sure that we
You
are
can work,
representative, but
you should be able to work with the building department.
Yep.
The
It's
building
not given
department,
that, like if you were building a house, you gotta build a house before they can come and look at it and say
Right.
whether you can have a CO or not.
yeah,
And
but
if you build it and it's not right, you don't get the CO, so.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
okay, just want to clarify.
We'll work with you folks, the building department, flyer, to make sure everything looks good for that. But yeah, I think that has been captured well.
Can I be notified of testing just so it's not a conflict? But I don't have a problem. Funeral or something like that. Because I understand the noise at first might be something that might be, intrusive. I can work with that, but just hopefully we can work together in the beginning of whatever to make it work.
We can make sure we work with you on that.
here we go. All right. Thank you, one and all. All right, our next meeting is February 26th, 2025 at 6 PM at this great location.
We will be upstairs.
Oh, wow. Now we're gonna move up.
Now we're gonna be upstairs. You ready? It looks like we have something on the agenda. We'll get that out to you once it is officially on.
Try to tease.
The administrative appeal. No, it is officially on there. We have an administrative appeal. That's for building commissioner issued a cease and desist. The person thinks they should not cease and desist. They are appealing that decision. It will become a need, folks. So I'll
Great.
begin with the
Great. Oh, good.
So I'll give you all the details, so you'll be able to review. I'll give you all relevant material, and then we have then expect that by February 6th. You will be receiving that because notification will be going out at the same time to.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi. Thanks, everyone.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.